saying. It feels like this year is multiple years.
Dog years, I'm calling them. COVID-19,
Yeah.
2021, 22, 23. Oh, keep admitting people. Welcome, welcome. All right, let me make sure it's
Saying. It feels like this year is multiple years. Oh.
dog years, I'm calling them. COVID-19, 20. All right, so that looks like it's live streaming there. Let me keep admitting participants. All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our session on inspiring learner voice through racial and social justice in UDL. My name is Elisa Torres Barton, and I'll be your facilitator, excuse me, let me rewind, Dr. Lean, I'm out. You're a moderator. Trying to volunteer here.
You can facilitate.
Oh, Lord have mercy. No. No, I'm here to learn. So I'll be moderating the chat, and just anything I can do to support you on the back end, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm just excited that I remembered to record. Live captions are available. Feel free to click on the CC at the bottom panel of your Zoom window. We're all pretty efficient here, proficient at our muting, but just make sure your microphone is muted if you're not speaking. We hope that you'll join us with your camera on, but again, it's recorded, so feel free to do what your brain needs or your heart needs today. In the chat, just like we've mentioned in other sessions, make sure that if you're sharing something, we'd love to learn from each other, right? Just make sure that you do that drop-down menu where it says to everyone. And I am thrilled. I'm going to pass the baton quickly before I volunteer too much to Dr. Lina Bashki and a first-year teacher that we're cheering for, Samantha Abarca. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I am so excited to be here and to be with you all to talk about all things UDL. So before we begin, I would love to hear from you in the chat. Where are you from? Oh, Megan's already doing it. Perfect. Just let me know where you're from and what you hope to get out of today. I think my worst fear is always we put in this huge entire presentation and people are like, that was a waste of my time. So hasn't happened yet, but we want to make sure that we are truly serving you and you all. So just anything that you're hoping to get out in the next hour, please let us know. We do have some breakout sessions planned and we have an awesome presentation for you, but I would just love to hear from you. We've got Oregon, represent, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Perfect. All right. Hello from Toronto, Canada. Okay, and were you about to say something, Sam? Totally cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just excited. I was like, oh, Canada.
Yes.
California, UCI, beautiful. Oh, New York
right.
City. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Megan. Yes. All right. Especially that's something that we're going to be diving into today as we, unpack some of our own biases as well. And yes, Canada represent. Okay. So our goal is to really expand on UDL in a way that allows us to think about it in terms of racial and social justice. So I think that the placemat is great and wonderful, and there's opportunity to look at it from a justice-centered lens. So how can we, as educators, as an education community, unpack it so that we're creating our anti-racist classrooms and we're doing it through the practices of UDL. So just a little bit about us. I'm from an organization called STEM for Real, and we support engaging standards-based science and math instruction, so STEM instruction, and we do this by building culturally relevant lessons. And this is how we do it, through connections and through the experiences of our students. So and this is my favorite part, because talk about a proud teacher moment. I'm having it right now. So if you see beams coming out of my face, it is because I am joined by my very own student. And, there are moments where you have that moment in time where you forget who's the teacher and who's the student. And that's my experience with Sam. So a little bit about me. I was a math and science teacher and instructional coach. I work with pre-service teachers. I've worked at UC Berkeley and now Claremont Graduate University. And I've also been a county level administrator, and my particular research interests are on the socioeconomic status and looking at STEM education for lower income schools and how we're creating access points. I'm going to hand it over to Sam to say a little bit about yourself.
All right, hi everyone. So I am Sam. I am currently a ninth grade science teacher at an Alliance charter, and it is called Judy Ivy Burden Tech, but Burden Tech for short. I am currently a first year teacher, so I just ended my student teaching residency. Woohoo! Snaps, thank you, thank you. And I am also a Claremont Graduate University alumni, where I got to meet the wonderful Dr. Lena Bakshi. And I was a student, but I'm still a student in her. So I'm really excited for the opportunity, and I'm excited to show you all the work that I've done so far too.
Awesome. Yes. And I'm also even more excited because the lesson that you're going to be working with today is straight from Sam. So we're going to be looking at an actual lesson plan and using the UDL placemat to see how we can learn and dig more for our lesson planning. So in terms of who this is for, it looks like we've got the right audience. If you could just let me know in the chat, what is your role? Are you working at the county office? Are you working, we have some people that are working with new teachers. Definitely, I'm sure we all have those new teachers in unsupportive schools and districts, unfortunately. So yeah, go ahead and just throw in the chat what your role is and how you particularly work with UDL. Okay, so we've got part-time staff at a local college and some training in healthcare. Okay, good. High school biology teacher, awesome. Arts integration specialist, great. PD developer, awesome. Instructional designer and run accessibility UDL workshops for faculty, excellent. Psychologist, very cool. Retired superintendent, chair of the CAS board, excellent, excellent. Woo woo, science coordinator of academic interventions. Okay, all right, so a lot, what I love about this group is that we have so much potential to just, touch so many lives with this work, which is great. All right, so we talked a little bit about who we are, and we believe that every single child, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, or creed, should be able to see themselves in STEM. And that is what I want to look at, is how we can use the principles of UDL, use the principles of justice-centered pedagogy, marry them in a way where students can see themselves in the content. So for today, our goal is to, again, we're going to be at a wedding. If everyone didn't know, we're coming to the wedding of UDL and the 5 E's. And we're, again, going to be looking at where cultural responsiveness fits into UDL in a way that we're truly embodying UDL and culturally responsive teaching. We're going to go through a sample lesson plan, and we're also going to be able to have all of us create our own culturally responsive phenomenon so that we can drive our own student learning. And of course, we are amplifying learner voice, and that is all Sam right here. So I want to pose this question to you. Who belongs in STEM? All right, so we've got everyone who wants to, everyone. All right, so we've got a unanimous everyone and all, and yet for some reason, our students don't feel that way. our students don't feel like STEM is for them. Students have said things like, oh, well, that's for white people. That's not for me. Or, my counselor told me that I should probably, do this instead. Or I was told I should major in humanities instead of physics. Our students are constantly hearing this, yet we know as educators, everyone belongs in STEM, but our practices aren't allowing for that. So here's an example. Let's look at environmental science, for example. I see so much of environmental scientists and I see a lot of white faces. Now, how can we as educators dismantle that idea and really amplify the voices of color? Here we have Dr. Ayana Johnson, Dr. Tyrone Hayes. In fact, that's how STEM for Real was born. Because I personally, when I was a science coordinator and a program director, I would look and I would see curriculum and it wasn't very diverse, and it still isn't diverse. So how can we make sure that we're diversifying our curriculum? And that's where UDL comes in, because we have all of these strategies and techniques, yet we're still missing the mark when it comes to creating diverse and culturally diverse experiences for our students. So let's take a moment to look at the root cause of inequity in STEM. We obviously see that there are some inequities. We see that there's a lack of diversity in STEM fields. We see that some people find it difficult to incorporate social justice and anti-racism. They see it as political, or, I don't have time for that. We got to teach Newton's laws. That's it. There's a lack of representation in our STEM curriculum. There's no time to teach. Some people, especially at the elementary level, they're like, oh, math and ELA, math and ELA. That's what our administration tells us. We see that our Black and Brown populations aren't getting access to STEM rigor. And there's no collaboration with like-minded colleagues. Let's say you want to do this work, and here we have this beautiful, chamber of people that are wanting to learn more about equity and diversity and anti-racism. But what if it's not like that at our own, context and our own organizations? So when we look at inequity and we look at social injustice, it's very important that we're not pointing fingers like, Sue, that's because of you, da 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 da. We don't want to do that, right? We have to address that this is a systemic problem. And so once we address the systems that are out there, that are in place, that are perpetuating these injustices, that's when we can do something about it. Okay, so I want to take a moment to actually talk about the UDL placement. So we're actually going to take a quick pause, and I'm going to stop my share. And what I want to do is I want to get us into a quick set of breakout rooms. And we're going to look at, let's bring up here it is. Okay. So many of you have seen this already, and these are the CAST guidelines for the UDL placement. So everyone has that in front of you. What I want you to do is, in breakout rooms, take a quick moment to introduce yourself and where you're from. And I want you, as you're looking at the CAST placement, go ahead and ask yourself, where is there anti-racism? Where is there diversity? If it's not there, how could it fit in? So I'll actually write that as well. Where is there?
How long should I set up the breakout rooms for?
If we could do like maybe just a quick 5 minutes.
You got it.
Where is there diversity, equity, and cultural response?
Are you saying where is it in the principles of UDL?
In the entire placement, those principles of UDL. And if it's not there, where could it be? If it is not there, where could it be? Like, how could it be manifested there? All right, so I'll repeat it again.
Self-select. Yeah, we'll have them self-select. How many participants would you like, Dr. Bakshi? So just
maybe about 3 to 4.
All right, so choose a room, friends, that only has 1 or 2 and make yourself the third and the 4 in about 5 minutes. Hopefully I remember how to do this.
Yeah, great.
And then Dr. Bashki and Sam, there is one that's called facilitators room. You guys can, the 2 of you can pop in that one if you'd like. And I'll stay here in the main room in case there's anything.
Okay, so when you click on breakout rooms, you can just join in. It looks like people are getting the hang of it.
Yeah, they're good.
I don't
Griffith
see,
is waiting for someone.
I
Sue,
don't
I
see
can,
where,
Sue, I can move you to.
yeah, you could put me anywhere you want. I
You
mean,
got
just
it.
don't send me to hell in a handbag, please.
Oh gosh, we've had enough of that with the pandemic.
Yeah, and people are welcome to stay in the main room if they want to reflect on their own, but yeah. So if you and Sam want to chat, I would just jump into that breakout room because otherwise it's going to show up in the recording.
Okay, well, in the meantime, if anyone wants to chat in here, you're more than welcome to do so. And we're happy to facilitate.
Wonderful.
I don't see a breakout room.
If you click on breakout rooms at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see it. If not, we can move you somewhere.
You may have to click on the more, the dot, 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 where it says more, and then breakout rooms pops up if you're not seeing it.
Okay, I see it.
All right, thank you,
Perfect.
Mia. Takes a
Thank
village.
you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna pop in on room 2 real quickly.
Nice. Okay.
Sam, they'll be back in about a minute. And Dr. Bosky.
I'm good.
Kind of attention and focus.
All right, so we close the breakout room, so I think people should be coming in.
It looks about 25 seconds.
Okay.
I like the background, Marcus. Very nice.
Oh, thank you.
What city is that?
The city.
Oh, this is recorded, so we're going to pause there, Mr.
Oh.
Jackson.
It's the big city. It's the big city, New York.
Okay, approved.
I know. I heard some New York coming out, Elisa.
Yeah, I'm from the DR, Dominican Republic, but born and raised in New York. But anyway, let's continue.
All right. So I heard some awesome conversations. I'd love to hear from you all. So if you feel brave enough, go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand, throw something in the chat, celebrate your group, your partner. Feel free. I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, my name's Griff. I'm from Northern California on the coast. And we were talking in our group about how the tenets of UDL are very accessible and can support diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom, but it's the implementation of educators where we may and not maybe amplifying student voice or understanding our communities where that could fall short. And so I personally was talking about self-reflection as a tool that's very important as we design for our learners, because we may make mistakes if we are supporting folks that are different from ourselves, and we want to make sure that we repair those mistakes and also amplify voices, so students feel like this is mine, this is me.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All of that. Any others?
Hi, my name's Meek, and I'll jump in for our group. I think the key thing, if I can try to capture it, was it's great, the guidelines, because they're so open, right? So it's may go beyond just race. It might be about embrace, like supporting people who are not neurotypical and things like that, right? But it doesn't get at those unconscious bias. So I might think I'm doing a great job minimizing threats and distractions, but as a white English first language speaking person teaching in North America, there might be things I'm going to miss. And so, but then you don't want to have like a 50-page document. So it's this weird balance of keeping it open enough, but maybe, and I actually like what you said, Griff, about actually maybe there's something separate about implementation that gets into some of the weeds of all that. So hopefully for my group, I captured that.
Yes. Awesome. And I love even, when I jumped into some of the groups too, being able to like see it there and you can weave it in. It's just having to do that work to be explicit and to weave it in. So yes, awesome. All right, so why don't we go ahead and jump right back in. So this is our framework. This is what we do, where we start with our phenomenon and we have that phenomenon drive our instruction. And so we start with the standard, and then we use the practice of the 5 E's. So engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. We then get our social justice standards, and we actively think about community and anti-racism. And if you're unfamiliar with the social justice standards, they are in the chat right now. And then finally, the most important part, was this a joyful experience? Is this something where you had fun as a teacher, as an instructor? Because if you're not having fun, I'm sure your students aren't having fun. So how do we incorporate that? This is where the marriage comes in. All right, we have this framework, we have this idea of what we're doing, but how do we actively ensure that this is a universal design for learning lesson? So you think about where UDL is, and essentially it's everywhere. So if you're going to have a learning sequence where it's engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate, well, we start with engagement. How are you going to incorporate engage? Or if you're looking at your explore activities, how are you making sure that there are opportunities for representation of the different information? So let's see what that looks like together. So I'm actually going to hand it over to Sam, and she is going to walk you through her lesson plan. But before we do that, is this the first time you're hearing about the 5 E's? Anyone? Feel free to raise your hand, raise an emoji. Okay, all right. So the 5 E's is a lesson plan. I actually first learned about it through BSCS, and I always forget what BSCS stands for, but they're an amazing organization. And a lot of our science curriculum is put together in the 5 E's. So essentially, if there's one thing you can take away from the 5 E's, it's activity before content. You do the activities before all of the vocabulary and the reading and all of that. Now, sometimes curriculum companies, they're tricky, and they go, students will engage in this reading. Come on. So we always say engage is going to be that hook. How are you going to get students and give them that why behind their instruction? Then they explore, do more exploratory activities, explain through the content, more elaborate activities, and then you can evaluate. So going through this, the first thing that you want to do is you want to start with your why. So we have the engage. This is where we ask ourselves, how are we recruiting interest in the lesson? So let's say you've got a lesson on photosynthesis. I'm excited. I'm a biology nerd. I'm really excited. But how are you going to recruit interest in the lesson? How about talking about the food shortages, the empty shelves in our groceries? How can we connect photosynthesis to a real life experience that our students are experiencing and going through right now? Representation. So what are all the ways that students perceive the information? Is it going to be a photosynthesis diagram? Is it going to be different languages that are going to be used? Is it going to, how are you going to have students and support students going through the comprehension and the understanding? Is it going to be videos? Are you going to act it out? How are you going to make it so that there are multiple ways that you're representing the information? We call that the what. And then the action and expression, how? How do you vary all the different ways that students are responding? What are all the multiple tools? So for us, even in this Zoom room, we've got live captioning, we have breakout rooms, we have, the chat. There are different ways and different opportunities to opt in on the lesson. Okay, so this is where we have to ask ourselves, what about anti-racism and what about justice-centered pedagogy? This is the question that I want you to ask yourself as you go through this conference and as you go through the UDL placemat. How can you make it explicit for your teachers and for your students? So many of you have already mentioned the examples, like, well, I'm going to make sure that when we're talking about community, we can also look at the students' cultural community and capital that they bring in. So everything that you talked about, how do you make it explicit? Okay, so this is a little bit about the 5 E's, and we're going to actually look at it in real time. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Sam.
All right, so I created a lesson plan about biodiversity since I am a science teacher. We were on the topic of biodiversity, and I was thinking to myself, how am I going to make this relevant to students and what is going on during this time? So during that time that I made the lesson plan, is there a question? Okay, never mind. We had the US Census survey. And then I don't know if you all got like notifications to please fill it out, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh, okay. And then so I was thinking about like racial demographics and classes. And I was like, this would be an awesome way to tie in biodiversity and what that means for our communities. So I first engaged students in looking at the US Census racial demographics for 2019 because 2020 wasn't updated just yet. So I was like, okay, let's work with the data that we have. And so I asked students to create a pie chart of their own community's biodiversity. So this can look like them drawing. I did this through the platform of Pear Deck. So you can actually see it through live online, how students are drawing and what are the data points that they're actually like creating their pie chart with. So this was a moment for students to kind of reflect on their community and how many people in their community identify as non-Hispanic white, Hispanic, Latino, Black, etc. And then afterwards, I asked students, is this inclusive of everyone? And a couple of students were like, no, because I don't identify as one or the other. So that's where I was really hitting on these critical questions about how this is not inclusive of everyone. Sure, we have 2 or more races, but that doesn't mean like Indonesian, etc. Right? So that's one way that I was able to engage students. And then through this, I opened the lens of biodiversity in science. And these are live links too to the actual racial demographics data. So students can go back and look at all that data later on too. And then if a student by any chance did not know what maybe non-Hispanic white meant, they could also click on those links and read the descriptions. So that was a little engage opportunity for students to engage in the US Census racial demographics and why that's important. Right. Oh, should we go back or should we keep going?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep going into the explore and everything.
So this is where I tied in the explore activities, and I really just wanted students to observe and come up with ideas as to which ecosystem might be the healthiest. So I'm still hitting on that biodiversity. So at the bottom, I actually started off with this picture with the flowers first for my students. And I said on the left side, you have flowers of the same species. And then on the right side, you have a variety of flowers from different species. And I asked students, which one do you think is the healthiest and why? And many students were able to indicate that it was the flowers on the left, the flowers on the right, because there was a variety. There was multiple different flowers in different colors that they were able to see. Before I totally forgot. Okay, so this is geared toward middle school, but it can also be implemented into a high school level too, just for background reference. So then after this, students were able to do the picture on the top, and then this right here is the rainforest and then the Arctic, and they were able to decide which one was the healthiest and why. So for this one was a little bit more tricky, but most students said the rainforest and most said the Arctic, but they all had their reasonings too. And then so for the explain portion, this is where I was able to link the connection between diversity and healthiness. So right here I had students, I was explaining this part, and then I had students write down these notes too. The variability among and between all organisms builds strength. So if there's a variety of species and a variety of organisms, that's going to allow for the ecosystems to have strength. And then I also did this through plants and animals, and how diversity also works with human health. If you have a well-balanced diet, you are better in physical well-being. And then for the elaborate, I was making connections here to previous learning, but also in context of biodiversity. So for biodiversity and social justice, that interconnection, I gave this realization to my students. If the level of biodiversity determines the health of an ecosystem, then we can also say that a healthy society is one that is diverse. And then afterwards, I had students elaborate just a bit more. How do environmental issues lead to the lack of biodiversity? So this is where I was going more into the science component, and I had them do a previous learning experience with like environmental issues that they could choose from, either global warming, pollution, deforestation, etc., and link it back to why that environmental issue is causing biodiversity to decrease. And then for the last portion, for the evaluate, I had students go back into actually going deeper into like California, because that's where my students are based. That's where I teach in California. And we took a deeper dive into the racial demographics of California. And I asked these 2 essential questions to my students after the whole lesson. what is this infographic showing you? So look at the data. I gave them some time to look at the data and work in groups and partners. Do you think the state of California is a healthy society? Why or why not? So this is where students took a moment to look at the data and evaluate what these colors meant and what racial demographics that was indicating and how it was moving throughout the years. So after that, my students came to a conclusion whether California was actually a healthy society or not. And in this case, you can see that California is actually moving towards a more diverse racial demographic, which means that this ecosystem or this society is healthy. So I had students make those connections between biodiversity and science and how that also relates to our own communities.
Is anyone else in disbelief that she's a first-year teacher? Lots of kudos, Sam. That's excellent. And if you missed any of that, of all that, in the chat, Elisa added added the entire lesson planning template. So this is actually the lesson plan that we use. And those are the Learning for Justice standards. Here's the lesson plan. So we're actually going to take a moment to go through the lesson plan back into your groups. But if you look at it here, we start with the standard, then we look at the hook. What's that hook going to be? As soon as we were talking about race and demographics and looking at the census data, so many of our students, especially at the middle school and high school level, they've had experience with that because of their parents and filling out the census data. So bringing that in as a hook, instead of talking about the biodiversity of different ecosystems, you're actually connecting it to a student's race. And then implications for society, how the census is connected to funding, demographics, etc. So as you go through, you bring in the social justice standards. You can also connect it to the environmental principles and concepts if you're in California. And even if you're not in California, it's a great set of standards to look at for environmental education. We then look at the do, know, think. So we have the do, the practices. So in this case, we were developing mathematical models with pie charts. And then we were also analyzing and interpreting data. We were analyzing the census. We looked at the know, so the actual content standards, and then the think. So what are the cross-cutting concepts you want to focus on? Sam wanted to look at analyzing different patterns, especially when you're looking at different biodiversity of different ecosystems, and also system models. So as students were creating their own model of a healthy and diverse ecosystem, what would that look like? We go right in. We encourage all of our teachers to choose case study students so that they can really get to know their students, their families, and bring in that family engagement piece into the work. And then we have the engaged, everything that we talked about: explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Now, what we do here is that we encourage our teachers to teach the lesson so that people can observe each other. And when they're observing each other, they're actually looking for this. They're actually looking for evidence in, like, how do you know that students are engaged? Well, we're going to be looking at students actively drawing models. Hopefully they're not talking about Savannah and Eric are dating and back together, because that's when, we have to figure out, okay, maybe we need to engage our students more. So you're looking at the observations and the evidence for each of those observations at each different step of the lesson plan. All right, and I'm missing some of the highlights. Okay, perfect. Yes. And that's what I love. Yes, please.
Okay, so I know it went a little bit quickly, but please take a look at this lesson plan because it's a lot more detailed and a lot more developed. And then we can also provide you with the slides of my lesson entirely. And you can also implement this in your own classroom. You can tweak it, change it, and also make it even more rigorous if you need to.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and go right back here. Okay. The next part I want to talk about when we're talking about UDL is how we can provide voice and choice for students in their learning. So thinking about when you have your own lesson plan, where are students having a voice? Like, where are they going to be talking with each other? When are they going to be looking at their own kind of reflections? And then also, is there a choice for them? You can look at this ecosystem or you could look at that ecosystem. So allowing for that as well. Now, these are the 4 things that I've put together to help you to make sure that we're getting at that engage piece for UDL. So increasing in classroom discussions, personalized learning plans, that's how you get to know your case study students. Thought-provoking lessons, of course, I had to put a giant AR-15. I mean, something that can really ignite thought, ignite, controversy and get students to think about this. And then, of course, interactive experiences. And like Megan mentioned earlier, I think it was Megan, Dr. Rebecca, looking at the connections of ELA and mathematics as well. So having those interdisciplinary lessons. So we're going to do it ourselves. I want you to think about a standard that you are going to teach or you're going to teach to your teachers. So think about a standard. It could be a next generation science standard. It could be a Common Core math standard. It could be a Common Core ELA standard. So think about your content standard that you want to teach. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into okay, our standard hook in society. So first, you have your standard. Then what's that hook going to be? How are you going to get students to get excited about your hook? So here's an example. We've got the standard, supported argument that plants get the materials they need for growth, chiefly from air and water. So that's the 5th grade standard. Here's the hook. So we've got some very not appetizing water coming out of this thing. What do you notice? What do you wonder? So let's just take a quick gander. What do you notice about this image? Would you like a glass of it? I see some heads shaking. See a thumbs down. So posing this, it doesn't look like healthy water. It doesn't even look like water. Yes, Joanna. So this is going to get your students to ask questions, pose the just or unjust situation to your students and have your students generate questions and observations. Dangerous, yes. So this is actually in real time a photo from the Flint, Michigan water crisis and one of the taps that showed this water. And now how do you incorporate it into society? So what is a societal issue? Of course, access to clean water, but you're also relating it right back to the standard right here, which is plants get their materials that they need for growth, chiefly from air and water. Well, if this is the water that plants are getting, we're going to have some really sad plants. So then how do you, take the time to read the news, look up current events, research issues, particularly researching issues that are affecting communities of color. And this is where you want to get to know your students, especially getting to know 1 to 2 case study students. And we actually have this slide. I know I always overplan. Teacher right here. So this is what we collect from our students, right? Attendance, behavior, this, that, all of those MTSS buckets. However, what else can we collect? How can we get our students' stories, their passions, their interests, their goals? So when you're getting all of this, this is where you can incorporate that into your lesson planning. Okay, so fast forward, standard hook society. This is where you can, take the time to Google the news, survey your students, connect to your themes of instruction, and then also think about any potential solutions. Maybe it's a letter writing campaign. Maybe it's some sort of youth action that students are really, maybe going back to Sam's lesson, they are writing a letter to the Census Bureau saying, hey, can you actually include my race or my ethnicity? So being able to do that. So let's hear from you. What are some ideas that you have in mind for your standard hook society? And where's my New York represent, Marcus? This one's for you. So all of the New York specific Google News that, you know, because sometimes people are like Flint, Michigan, Flint who? So being able to find articles that are relevant to your local context is helpful.
Could I say something?
Yes, please.
You know, here's the thing with that water crisis. It affected individuals from low SES and people of color. And so white folk was like, well, what can I do? Nothing. It's not my problem. New York State will handle it, which is totally not UDL and totally not a perspective of community and forward thinking.
Yeah, everything that you said. And I think that's the tough part, especially when we're thinking about social emotional learning and teaching empathy for other communities. People are like, oh, we got to get this new social emotional learning curriculum. And then, you know, check. But what if we could incorporate social emotional learning right here in our own content?
And here's the thing, Lena,
Yeah.
like if you're a little child of color up in the Bronx or anywhere in New York City, and you're just used to dealing with brown water, and you're just used to somebody not paying attention, then you become calloused. And you just think, well, that's the way it is. That's where we have to start, because that's not the way it should be. And it's really hard to break the mold. And I have my colleague here, Timothy, and it takes a lot of people. Thank God we're at Tyrone. We have a lot of different people who are trying to break into neighborhoods, who are tired of people like me coming in and saying, I'm here to help. Yeah, for 60 years, I come in, I have a grant, I have a little money, and then I disappear and the water is still brown.
Yeah, all of that. And I actually learned this from one of the curriculum companies, Green Ninja, where they focused a lot on environmental education. And they're actually doing research showing it. And if we're able to focus our efforts on education, that's actually going to make a difference in achieving environmental justice versus, you know, you can get a clean car. Yes, that works as well. But also being able to work in education and convey this message and convey this to people. That's why I opened with this presentation that we are all so powerful in this Zoom room right here.
Especially the little kindergarten kids who are taught to stand up and say, I don't want brown water in my house, not for my mama, not for my grandma. I don't want brown water. And we can help with that.
Yes. Yeah. And then also just, you know, bringing it back to our lesson plan, going back to the standard. We know that we have to teach the standard. That's something that we have to do. Now, how do we connect it? How do we get that hook? And how do we incorporate it into our own society? So this is just an example of how you can start, you know, again, connecting it to UDL, using the principles of UDL, creating a social justice culture, having your phenomenon, having students generate questions, making observations, do the activities that will make sense of the STEM, of all of the science, and then allow students to talk. So being able to explain, argue, and have those discussions, that's the controversy that we want to cultivate in the classroom. So I want to leave you with a few questions, and then we're going to jump into breakout rooms. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to ask you, as we're talking about UDL, are we doing UDL justice? So thinking about what are all the questions that you could ask your staff, your faculty, your school. Is science taught? If so, how regularly? And are we getting the same access in, looking at math and ELA? Are we getting the same funding as math and ELA? Are we looking at environmental science? Can we look at, the pandemic unveiled the digital divide? So how are we supporting families? Are teachers getting professional learning in culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching? We know that teachers are getting professional learning. However, is there a focus on culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching? And how are we diversifying the field of science, environmental science, literacy, any of the topics that you choose to teach? How can we diversify it? I know we've learned a lot about American poetry. There's Blake and Wordsworth and all that. There's also Langston Hughes. There's also Amanda Gorman. So, you're seeing how can we diversify our own context to do this? So I want to give you a moment to process everything that we talked about. So for another whopping 5 minutes, I want to leave you with Sam's lesson plan. And we're going to go ahead. I'm going to put that in because I know we've had a lot of links. So I'm going to add this right here, the lesson plan. And then also the Learning for Justice standards right here. And finally, as always, I want to make sure that you have access to your UDL placemat. So with these 3 things, what could you do to looking at Sam's lesson? What would you add? What would you modify? What did you like? Etc. So I just want to give you a last bit of 5 minutes with your team. So if we could go ahead and open up.
Marcus,
the room's already open. Huh?
I'm about to open. Marcus, did you unmute on purpose? Go ahead, friend.
I did, just real quick, because I want to go back to what Sue was saying. And, most communities and culture, and I'm not from New York. I just love the city. I'm from Denver. But I don't care. Most communities don't care what color you are. If you know their community, you build relationships, you understand the cultures within that community, you could be green because they know when you're coming in there to make a difference and when you're not. So just understanding that piece, if you truly build those relationships, it will make the difference of the world. And you'll get the buy-in and the commitment from that community. So I just want to say that before you went into groups.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Marcus, can I build on what you just said? As a first-year teacher, again, building those relationships with your students and getting to know them gives you the ability for your students to respect you and hone in on your lessons and how you interact with your students. Like for me, that's been such a game changer because knowing my students, I was able to connect science content, but relevant to them. So I'm making meaningful, relevant connections to my students. And that has been a game changer. And I love it. And my students know that I care because I come from authentic caring from their communities. So yeah, awesome. Thank you, Marcus.
All right. I know I don't want to stop the discussion. It's so good. The rooms are open. Feel free to hop in and I'll get you in 5 minutes.
Well, and students and communities know when you're being authentic, right? Like, how are you showing up into that space? And is it like here, the white savior complex, or am I here to work with you? And students know the same thing, right? Like students know when you're showing up as your authentic self and are there to see them as their authentic self and then help them become their favorite self.
Yes.
Rather than impose whatever guidelines on them.
Yes. Yes.
That's why that whole piece about voice, right? Student voice, like how am I going to know, right? Because it's also that danger of have you heard that saying about the danger of the one-sided story or
the single story? Yes.
The single story, right? Like as much as I identify as Dominican, born and raised, blah, blah, I don't represent every single Dominican daughter of immigrants. And so that student voice, that piece of me getting to know you authentically is going to say, okay, what is Elisa And then we know variability is right, the norm. And so on a Friday, I might be here. By the time I'm a junior, I might be there. Right. So that's a constant demand for us to engage our learners so that we're relevant, if that makes sense. And shallow word, relevant, but to make an impact.
I was just pulling up that video.
Yeah, the danger of a single story, I think it was the TED Talk or something. Yeah. Tara, do you work with Wyatt?
I do.
Yeah.
And I also know.
I'm the Wyatt and Fresno.
Oh, cool. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
If anyone wants to join participant room 6, I think Lisa is by herself.
Hey, yo, I haven't go to another meeting, but I appreciate this. This is awesome. You really got me inspired, and keep doing the work, okay?
Awesome. Marcus, if you can go ahead and fill this out too. It's just our exit ticket.
For sure.
That's such a teacher move. Like, so I know you're on your way up, but here's your assignment, right?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I got you.
UDL.
Yes, down the hall, right? Like, here you go.
I'm like, wait. Here's your homework.
Yes, love
With
it.
your formal assessment, here you go.
Yes.
All right. Let's see.
Take
Here.
care, Marcus.
All right. I'm getting this taken care of too. I promise I'll get it. You need it. Let me make this meeting. I got this. I promise you.
All right, Marcus, I'm going to be looking for your name.
It's recorded, Marcus. It's recorded.
Man, y'all recording this part too. Yeah, I got you. You look for my name.
All right.
All right. Take care. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Okay. Bye.
So ladies, we're at 12:06, well, California time. So about 4 more minutes. You want me to bring them back in a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for this presentation. I'm really enjoying it. Sorry about my camera being off. I'm actually multitasking. I'm really sorry, but I'm getting a lot out of this. So thank you very much.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah, no worries. All right, breakout rooms are closing.
We'll have 2 minutes when we get back.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I know that was a very, very quick 5 minutes, maybe 3. I know we totally cut you off, Sue. But feel free. I'd love to hear, from you or anyone, how did the little bit of time work out for you?
Lena, here's what I was going to say. We talked about the needs of students, all right? And then we got to the teachers. Well, the students, they're supported by parents somewhat, by teachers somewhat, but the teachers have this overwhelming responsibility to figure out where the students are academically, socially, and emotionally. But then somebody has to support the parents. And somebody has to inform the parents that we support you. We support your child. Please know that we are on course to help your child stay in school and blah, blah, blah. Even though the teacher's saying it, like I could say that, I would say to myself, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it, but I am going to do it. That's a big responsibility for teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you named that. Exactly. So yeah, that was, I can't believe our time is already up. We have so much more to say and talk about, but hopefully you were able to see the power of the 5Es, marrying the 5Es with UDL, being very explicit and apparent with our equity and justice centered framing and how we have to do that as teachers. And then finally being able to craft your own culturally responsive phenomenon using that framework of the standard, the hook, society. So I've added some resources for you, but feel free to stay in contact with us. You can follow us on social media. We're always talking about this stuff. And we also have some free webinars on our website that you're more than welcome to check out as well. And finally, Elisa added in the chat our feedback link. We're constantly presenting on this work, so we want to make sure that we are, doing our best, and we'd love to make sure that we're hearing from you as well. So that's all we've got, and give it up for Sam, star teacher.
Thank you. I'm so excited to start my first year. Woohoo!
Be great. You've already gone through the fires of hell. You will be so good.
Thank you, Sue. And
Practice your
all.
wellness, Sam. That's important for you. You are amazing. We need you to stay in the profession. That's the key.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
She has my number on speed